Just raise it.
The webinar. Welcome, and I see Chef Liam has just joined us. Welcome to Chef Liam.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, and you, Chef?
Good, thank you.
We're very, very fortunate. We have almost 60 people in our webinar, and as it is now 12:30, I thought we'd start. Welcome to everyone to our very first SA Chefs webinar in these very strange and trying times. I'm going to go through a quick just how we're going to do this. I have obviously our panelists, Anton, Meiring, Borain, and Chef Liam will be speaking to you on a topic that I think everybody is very, very concerned about. And that is, what are we going to do with our students post this COVID-19 lockdown? And what are we doing right now? Also, how our hospitality industry is influenced by what is happening. We have prepared a few, I've guided the presenters today on a few things that I think everybody has on their minds, and I will go through them quickly with you. It is the impact of the current situation on their business, how they foresee the business coping when lockdown is eased or lifted, how many students they used to take into their establishments, and how many they think they're going to take going forward. And if the panelists have any suggestions on what to do going forward or when they're open. Just a few things. I've muted all our attendees. There is a Q&A which you can put questions to, and at the end of the webinar, I will address a few of these questions, or I'll present them to our panelists. We are very, very fortunate, as I said, to be joined by these three industry leaders, and I'm quickly going to introduce them to you. Anton Meiring is the general manager of the Protea run by Barry at Tambo, and he has been in this job or in this industry for more than almost 20 years. Am I right, Anton? And he has gone through the ranks, starting off as a in-service management trainee many years ago. Borain, I'm sure you all know. She is a powerhouse in the training and development industry, and is the training and development manager for the Tsogo Group. Karen has been in the industry for almost 4 decades. You won't believe it, but it's true. And she is, and she has a big supporter of SA Chefs. Obviously, we are very, very fortunate to have her here. She is also a recipient of the SA Chefs President's Award. And then Chef Liam Tomlin, who is, I always say I'm so nervous because he's a personal hero of mine in kitchens. And we are very, very fortunate with somebody who has had such a wonderful career, is so highly respected as a chef, as an author, in our panel today. So thank you very much for everybody who has joined us. I have gone through the questions already, and I will go through them again. But I think we must start and give our panelists a chance to talk through how they see the changing face of workplace-based training going forward past COVID-19. Anton, can I give over to you?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the invite and the opportunity. I hope I can add some value here this afternoon. So just to jump straight into the questions, sort of the discussion topics that you mentioned. I think a lot of this stuff is very known to everybody, so I hope I'm not going to regurgitate much known information. But I mean, for us at the moment, what we've seen largely, obviously leading to the point where we've closed down, is obviously massive occupancy declines. In March, we finished a good 25 points lower than the prior year, especially when things started to get quite serious and we were building up to this point of lockdown. Obviously for us now at this point in time in April, there is absolutely nothing. So we're just sitting with a whole bunch of expenses and no revenue to try and put against that. obviously this impacts us quite badly. But then, of course, we're not alone in this. So this impacts a lot of our suppliers also quite negatively, considering, many of them have got quite a bit of a staffing component towards it. So you're looking at things like security, grounds, the guys that do the recycling, all sorts of things like that. Then further, just building up to that, one of the things that we were hit with negatively is that we were unable to fill a lot of our vacancies. So we're also sitting with a lot of key positions at the moment that we haven't been able to fill in anticipation of business going bad and us not being able to afford those salaries. So we're sitting, which maybe speaks a little bit to this environment that we're talking to. We're sitting with a lot of vacancies with some key critical skills that when things get better, we are going to have to recruit against. And then just kind of maybe more my experience so far, I don't know if everybody else is in the same sort of boat, but we also feel that the support from government has been quite dismal and quite minimal to this at this point in time. Hopefully a little bit more might come out of our efforts, but things like TERS and UIF and all these other things to support our staff and just business, it just, the president goes on TV and he says one thing, but when you go through the process of actually applying and actually trying to get all of these things, the experience is very, very different, which then, again, puts additional strain on you as the business. How we foresee business coping when lockdown is eased or lifted. So there's kind of two scenarios, especially in hospitality, that we can look at the moment. The one is either you're fortunate or lucky to be able to get some quarantine business, or you're not. We are in the unfortunate position where we don't have any quarantine business. So for us at this point in time, we're only really looking at starting to get going again when the lockdown eases up to possibly a level 2. Having said that, though, there's talks of airlines and things like that getting going on level 3, which means that there could be an opportunity once again from a hospitality point of view for some establishments to get going a little bit earlier, because there are crews and technical support and all sorts of things that would need to travel again before level 2. Then just also on the point of quarantine business, for us also, it's a little bit risky when you're looking at the whole quarantine situation, because when you look at quarantine business, you're also inevitably looking at something that's going to be potentially 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how the whole process goes with the testings and the double negatives and all sorts of things that government might require. That business, every single time we look at something like that, you've also got to take into consideration, well, if I take something like that now, lockdown gets eased up in a week, potentially more easements come a week after that. How is that then going to affect us to be able to take back some of our regular clients and get going again as a business as well? So, there's a bit of risk and reward that also needs to be balanced with that. Either way, though, when we do get going again, it's definitely going to be a very slow and staggered approach to getting the hotels up and running. The sources of business will obviously be quite limited. One of the key ones that stand out where there's going to be very little business or no business at all is all of the international travel that we've grown so accustomed to. So, tourists and things like that, with the borders closed or with borders also going to be opened very, very gradually, you're not going to see any of that business coming through. So that again would, call for a very slow, staggered way of reopening. But then obviously on top of all of this, so far the guidance from government has been that when you bring your workforce back, you can only bring back a third at a time. So again, the opportunities for staff to take up hours of work is going to be very limited. And then obviously that's going to spill into how we start dealing with trainees and learners and things like that. Because I think a big reality of the whole situation is going to be that your permanent employees will have to get phased in first before you can start looking at taking on trainees and learners and things like that. When we do go back, though, another consideration for us is going to be what does the offering look like then versus what it used to look like. So for us at the moment, we don't foresee big full restaurants with just people sitting all over the show at tables and people filling up the bars and all sorts of stuff. It's probably going to take on much more of a picture of the kitchen and the whole thing supporting operations in terms of possibly pre-packed meals that have to meet all sorts of requirements, or potentially leaning much more to offerings that just look much more like room service, being sent up to the rooms, so that, you know, we can still, for as long as things are going around and there's still numbers out there, to reduce as much social, to promote as much social distancing as possible, but then also in anticipation of a lot of people that would be very apprehensive to go and sit in restaurants. We are definitely expecting to see a radical impact on events and conferencing business. That should be practically zero for the next while. And then what we're also expecting to see is when that starts coming back, there's going to be numbers that don't really match the kind of things that you used to do in the past. So there's an expectation that there's still going to be a lot of requirements in terms of social distancing, the amount of people that can be gathered at one particular place at any given time. And we anticipate things like, for example, your 100-seater venue is going to all of a sudden only be able to take capacities of 50, for example, because now all of a sudden, you know, people are still wanting to sit that 1.5 meters apart, as opposed to you being able to have 3 people, you know, sitting next to each other on a table, as an example. So again, that spills over into, you know, the amount of staff that you need, the amount of resources that you need, and you could see a very slow return from that point of view as well. What we also are going to expect, and I think it's already, we were already gearing up towards that pre-lockdown, especially with you know, a lot of vacancies that we couldn't recruit against, is that versatility and flexibility among staff is going to become quite a big sort of expectation or even a requirement. So your job function might become less and less relevant, as opposed to the variety of skills that you could bring into the workplace, in terms of you can do this and this and this and this, and that you're not necessarily only focused on that one particular thing. What we are seeing, though, and this is now from a group point of view, and it brings a little bit of positivity to everything, is now where everything started and where the biggest lifts have been seen so far, obviously in China, is that they are reporting, especially from the Marriott properties, that there is quite a bit of domestic business that is already returning. So if, you know, what's happening over there, you kind of expect that similar things will start, you know, happening everywhere else as we get to similar stages in this whole pandemic. Is, you know, domestic will come back first. There's going to be a surge, first of all, in, you know, all of that sort of corporate government-related business coming back, and then eventually other business will start coming back. But the positive is that, you know, many hotels in China have reopened already, and there is already quite a bit of domestic business taking place there. So it's not exactly kind of the numbers that, you know, we would want, but a little bit of something is kind of better than nothing in many instances. And at least occupancies are starting to push into sort of those 20% marks for many properties. And from the last numbers that we kind of heard was that we're already sitting with about 80% of the hotels having reopened already. So there's a very big positive sort of in that direction. One of the things that they've been talking a lot about in Marriott, so I don't know if it's necessarily going to be as true for us in South Africa as it could be in some of the other countries, Dubai, for example, is that they're also expecting that there could be a very large uptake from a food and beverage point of view first, before rooms follow. kind of in the sense of there will be a lot of testing of the water in terms of, let's go out for a meal, let's go out for a culinary experience, or whatever the case may be, before people kind of regain that full-on confidence for let's go away for a holiday that lasts a week long, 2 weeks long, or do a whole trip that sees us moving around quite a bit. So hopefully, we do see similar sort of things also happening over there, whereby at least our properties can be supported more from a food and beverage point of view, again, as opposed to kind of nothing at all. Then to me also, and I think very important to this particular conversation is, I think one of the things that we also have to remember is that we've got a lot of legislative requirements on our businesses, which are not necessarily going to go away. So things like triple B, double E is still going to very much be a thing. WSP is still very much going to be a thing. ETI is still very much going to be a thing. So we would still need to very much be supporting training initiatives, etc., to make sure that we get all of the required points to be able to support ourselves in terms of obviously getting the best possible BEE level that we can to attract pieces of business that have that as a requirement. But then also on the flip side, to also make sure that we get as much money again from government coming in as possible in the forms of what we are doing right in terms of WSP and ETI, which then again speaks a lot to making sure that we've got these students in our properties to be able to claim against those things. So for us also at present, we're sitting usually under normal circumstances, anything maybe between 15 to 25 students in various forms and various disciplines, and a mixture of internal and external. From an external point of view, in the kitchen specifically, usually between 4 to 6. That was our situation. And again, I do believe very strongly that that will be our situation again. It's just not necessarily going to be that from day one when we reopen. And just like we have to stagger our approach with staff, and we are going to be focusing on our permanent employees first and foremost, that is going to come back again, like very, very, I hope, very soon, where we will be able to support those levels of learners and trainees again. Sort of my suggestions, especially for training providers and how to sort of adapt to the new things going forward, is just like I've touched on a little bit before. I believe that versatility is going to be quite important. So considerations for how do we make sure that we equip people to be able to do as many things as possible and not just always hanker down in one specific speciality, because you might find that your need for that one speciality might only be 50% of what it was, 20% of what it was. But if you're a more robust and versatile individual during and at the end of your trainee, there could be a lot more options for you to be able to take up traineeships, employment, whatever the case may be. I would think, and it's something that we kind of anticipating, is that there could be certain shortages and things that haven't quite hit us yet, but could still be coming. So I think invaluable skills to have would also be how to review what your offerings are and have those kind of skills in place where you know how to streamline what you're offering and how you can potentially adjust and swap out your offerings and things to make sure that, all of a sudden I've got a shortage or the country's experiencing a shortage in this. How do I now still produce something with similar or better quality where I'm not changing this for that? And how do I do things potentially in a much more leaner and more efficient manner, as opposed to being a little bit more comfortable and complacent, and I can just take little bits of everything and do what I used to do. Again, I think now, especially for the actual providers building up, and I expect, again, especially because of the 33% issue and a lot of hotels starting with lower occupancies, a suggestion I would have specifically for training providers is how do you look at the flexibility of the way that your program is also structured? Are there opportunities to bring theoretical things forward a little bit and defer practical trainings to a little bit of a later stage? How can you kind of, custom and tailor what you're doing now to kind of support that? You might have to sit in the classroom now a little bit longer and then only be able to, fulfill any sort of physical requirements at a bit of a later stage. And then how do you as a provider accommodate that within your system so that it's now all of a sudden, well, you haven't done these hours, so you can't quite take that next step yet. I would also put a lot of emphasis on sort of the administrative elements of what is being done. I think we can all sort of think back to when we had the listeriosis things happening. One of the responses immediately from government was, let's throw out all of this extra legislation in terms of hygiene and this and that and the next thing. I think very similarly for something that now is on such a exceptionally large scale in comparison to what that was, we should probably expect that there's going to be a whole lot more boxes that are going to be expected to be checked of us, that are going to have to be supported from an administrative point of view. So like really training and gearing people up to be able to cope with that is going to be quite important, I think. And then on top of that, again, just to go back to, how we all of a sudden now get plunged into having to deal with, preserving cash and looking after our margins and things like that, making sure that we also equip our learners and trainees on how can you deal with managing and controlling your margins better, streamlining your operations, pulling the best efficiencies out that you possibly can to make sure that you're running something that's truly sustainable and that supports kind of the bigger picture. And then I also do think that we're going to head into a scenario whereby we're going to have to become a lot more strict with sort of what the requirements are and the expectations are that we place on our staff, on our trainees and everybody else. So potentially selection criteria and who we give these opportunities to needs to maybe get a little bit of extra focus and sharpened up a little bit, where we know that we are now 100% selecting the right people for these opportunities, as opposed to kind of just making it available to a lot of people, because it's going to probably become a situation of be very well equipped so that you can swim, otherwise you're going to sink. And we're going to want to put a lot of emphasis on those guys that are able to swim, and the ones that are sinking, they might not be able to get as much attention because we're running leaner businesses. They're not going to maybe be able to catch up to all of the requirements the way that we would want them to. So we're going to kind of defer and spend a little bit less time on them, or ask them to be moved out so that we can get in, those really top caliber guys to support our businesses. I think I've kind of gone over my 10 minutes, as I have a bit of a tendency of doing, but just on the whole sort of thing, those are kind of where my thoughts are and where I see things at the moment.
Anton, thank you very, very much. Oops, I just dropped my pen. Thank you very much. I think it was really, really insightful. And I think the providers is going to get a lot out of this today. If you talk about skills they need, the versatility that our hospitality industry, our training providers and our students will need. And also very pertinent at the end, that we're going to have to be very careful how we choose these sites for the students. And how we're going to select those to go to places so that they can get maximum exposure in the time they are there. Thank you very, very much. I just want to tell everyone, as I said earlier, please post your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. I think we're going to keep the questions for the end. So once all our panelists have had a time to say their say, that we then deal, and I'll bring those up for you to and then to answer. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to ask Karen, Anton, you can mute yourself and have a look and listen. I'm going to ask Karen to join us now. As I said earlier, Karen is a powerhouse in our industry when it comes to training and development, looking after the training and development of 8,000 people and 500, I think, students from training providers nationally. So Karen, as we went through earlier, thank you very much, and over to you to talk a little bit about how Tsogo-san is managing this process and how you foresee it going forward.
Okay, so obviously an overlap with what Anton has shared, so I'm going to try and just keep that out of my conversation. So if you look at Tsogo-san with 98 properties, there was a SENS announcement, which you can Google if you want to, that was issued prior to the start of lockdown. When due at that stage to decreasing occupancies, we'd made the decision to close hotels and consolidate business into specific hotels in each location. Obviously, with the lockdown, that was put aside, but that would be the strategy going forward until the industry, in inverted commas, normalizes. So we do see that as quite a long time away, obviously watching what is going on in other countries, but when you see what the government's saying about hotels, as Anton said, we're looking at a level 2, which seems to be quite a way away. So currently our employees are off for anything from lockdown to 3 months, with minimal employees working. All senior management in the organization are working and executives are working, although on reduced salaries. So coming back once lockdown is over, it'll be months, we believe, before bookings really get back to the levels that we would like to see in our business. We know that guests book a few weeks in advance, conferences, as we know, generally booked annually, and with school holidays cancelled, it's going to be a really bleak time. I think that restaurants will open up. Unfortunately, our culture in this country is not to visit hotel restaurants, but as restaurants are able to open up, they'll venture into those and into their local restaurants before they really venture into hotels, which makes it an interesting time to be running business because money's tight. Money's tight for the public, which makes it tight for the business, and hotel stays are not going to be a priority spend. It's quite strange to think of running a business without revenue, because we know that when you're running a business, although you might not have revenue coming in, it does mean that your costs are still there, and that becomes a huge balance. Our history is that we've supported work integrated learning for 50 years with the very first intake at the School of Tourism and Hospitality, or the Technikon of Waterfront as it was those days, the hotel school. And any year we have well over 500 students, can be anything between 500 and 1,000 students in our business. Now, post-lockdown, this absolutely won't be the case. Like Anton, we're going to have to prioritize spend on our employees, both the full-time employees, getting them back first. And then, of course, we have hourly paid workers that, we really feel for as a business because they will have suffered during this lockdown and this closure period. We need to really look after those employees. And it's going to be really hard to provide a space of learning for students when we have our employees that we need to be focusing on. Once our hotels reopen, I really don't have a specific idea of when we will be ready to take students. Our philosophy has always been to really support the schools. We have thousands of employees who've come through the schools as it is, but this is a whole different scenario. I think that when it looks at suggestions on how you can adapt to the new normal, and it is going to be very different. I mean, as a training practitioner with, well over 30 years, I know that I have to do things completely different when I come back. That's where our focus is at the moment. We're looking at how do we offer something to our organization that is completely different to anything that we've ever offered before. So we're looking as a learning and development department to say, what will this look like? How will we be offering training going forward? And as a learning and development manager, what I'm looking at is asking myself the question, how do I get as close to zero cost as possible for any training that I'm going to offer in the foreseeable future? So we obviously have salaries and we have a team of people that can deliver training, but how do we get that training in our business at as close to zero additional costs on top of salaries as possible, whilst understanding that we have our mandatory training that we need to do, and we have also the BBBE consideration, etc. We really need to get it as low as possible. I would really encourage education providers to look at it completely differently. So, you know, we're saying, myself looking at my own department in this my own organization, of just how do we just work completely differently? How do we zero base whatever we're doing and look at a whole new world that we could be offering? And I think there's wonderful opportunity there. I think it's exciting. I'm working with my team. We're talking every day and throwing ideas around and looking at, you know, what is the normal for the first month, for the next 3 months, for the next 6 months, and ultimately for the year that follows. So trying to be proactive, looking at opportunities and looking at what our strengths are, and also zero basing needs analysis. How do we look at the needs of the business? How do we look at the needs of our learners? And we're not taking anything from what we've had. We are zero basing all of that as we look at it. So our curriculums, our way of delivering learning and training, our way of managing our people around their learning and the training that we're going to be offering. And I would really encourage, you know, the people on this call to be doing exactly the same thing. So just look at it completely differently and ask yourself, how can we create different environments for learning? How can we find new ways of learning? I think some of the opportunities at the moment, especially in anybody providing food, is that there's charities that are looking for people to help them to feed people. You know, if kitchens can offer reasonably priced meals to the public so that the public can eat out again, I think we're almost going to need to have opportunities for people to eat out and maybe look at new guests that didn't have an opportunity before to eat out. My son lives in Spain, and in Spain they have 1 day of every week where the restaurants have to offer a menu to the public that is incredibly cheap, that opens up eating out for everybody in the country, and that it doesn't become something that is only open to the elite to be able to eat out. And I think those are the kind of opportunities that providers can look at to say, how can we start engaging with a different guest that offers opportunities for your learners to be able to have a workplace that is real, that's working with guests. There's so many executive chefs at the moment who are not able to work, and their properties might not be opening up even once lockdown is over. They're passionate about training. Perhaps they can come in and volunteer to run kitchens for you, to be part of your learning environment so that your learners are exposed to people who are working in the industry without them necessarily having to go into the industry. I think there's lots of places that I would encourage you to look at in terms of work integrated learning. As a large hotel group, we get on average, even now that we're in lockdown, I am getting requests daily for people looking for opportunities for work experience. We actually have one person who works full-time only looking after work integrated learning because of the volumes that come through in terms of requests and opportunities that people are looking for in our business. And I really want to encourage you as providers to broaden that base and look at, if people are not coming into hotels or traditional restaurants, what other opportunities are there? Who else is providing meals? Whether it's children's homes, retirement villages, clubhouses on estates, etc. I do think that there's a lot of opportunity in those environments for students to go into to expand the base of their learning opportunities. So we need to not just look at the traditional ones that have been relied on for years, but really look at something completely different. So that's my thoughts and my thinking. I hope that was of value. And I'm going to hand back to you, Elsu.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Karen. I think that was immensely helpful. And I think our training providers are looking at, or I hope they are looking at, how they can change the environment, how they can use executive chefs that are currently not working once they are able to get their students back at colleges. And I think change is going to be the new normal. We are now, that is who we're going to have to be. We're going to have to change and adapt, and that's going to be the new normal. Everybody in more than just the hospitality industry will have to go forward. Lastly, we have Liam, who's a restaurateur and a chef down in Cape Town. Liam, are you still with us?
I'm still here.
Wonderful. So we've heard about the hotel groups and what they are doing and how many people they are taking in. And I thought it would be valuable if we include somebody from the restaurant industry who is running restaurant properties and how they see this industry going forward for our training providers and for trainers and for our trainees. Liam, if you can just open up your video, and then everybody can see your beautiful face, and we can.
How do I do that?
Let me see if I can.
Let me see. Start video.
Yes, that's it.
There we go. Are we on?
I'm not seeing you. I'm not seeing you yet. Right at the bottom of your. There you go. All right. Well, over to you. Thank you, Liam.
Okay. Obviously, I'm very familiar with the hotel industry because part of what I do, I've got 6 restaurants. One of them's in Barcelona and 5 of them here in Cape Town. But I'm also involved with the Singita group. So I work with Singita in their 13 different lodges in South and East Africa. So that's where my main salary came from. So I don't take salaries from my restaurants, but my main salary came from Singita. So obviously Singita have had to close all of their properties. So obviously, as a consultant, I didn't feel right to continue invoicing Singita when I wasn't able to travel and work within the group. So, you know, we're all been affected hugely. Our restaurant in Barcelona closed down, I think, about 10 weeks ago because Spain obviously went into lockdown mode before we did. And I think by the beginning of next month or the first week of next month, we're going to be allowed to do a certain amount of food preparation in Barcelona, but it's going to be nothing like what we were doing before close down. With the restaurants here, as soon as the president announced the alcohol restriction from, you know, not being able to serve alcohol after 6 o'clock in the evening, and at 1 o'clock on public holidays and Sundays, I decided to close all of our restaurants because it was costing me money to keep them open. We went from full restaurants, and then the next day with the restrictions on Bree Street, for an example, we did 4 covers. So it was actually cheaper for me to close the restaurants down. We've got 300 staff all up in all our restaurants. We haven't let anybody go. I don't want to let anybody go. We've got Maison Kitchen in Franschhoek is open. We are helping Margot Jans do feeding program, which started off when I was up there. The first week we were feeding 400 families between us. And she's just messaged me during this call telling me it's gone up to 4,500 families. So there's a group of chefs up in Franschhoek who've opened their kitchens, and we're all doing feeding program to feed the people in the townships. And a lot of them are our staff who work for us normally in the restaurant. So it's crazy times for us in the restaurant, in all industries. And it's very difficult. You know, we've been told now we're going into next week on May the 1st, we can do takeout. But for me, that isn't an option for our restaurants. We're not geared for it. It'll cost me more money to open up, turn the stoves on, turn the electricity on, get staff to come in, start getting suppliers come in. And I've got no idea what I'm catering for. Am I going to get 2 orders, 6 orders, 20 orders? I have no idea. So I've done the maths on it, and it's just not worked for me to open. So we're just going to sit tight, and we're going to see what, you know, eventually when we are allowed to open, what the terms and conditions are going to be, and then I'll make the decisions then. As a group, obviously, I've got partners in the business, but I've also got landlords. So, I'm busy worrying about my own business, but I'm also very busy worrying about my landlords, because I also don't know what position they're going to be in when we all come back. It's very possible, like we've got 3 restaurants based on wine farms, one in Constantia, one in Franschhoek, and one in Paul. It's very possible that our landlords could be the first thing they want to get rid of when they come out of lockdown is wine farms. Some of them are their businesses, but it's not their main business. It's almost a hobby for some of them. So that could be the first thing that they decide that they need to offload. So I'm also concerned if we'll have venues to operate from when we come out of this. So there's lots of things to consider. And, our restaurants are designed, if it's a 60 seat restaurant, it's designed to serve 60 people. It's not designed to serve 20 people or 30 people with, all this keeping our distance. So it's very difficult for me to make the decisions now, know what the rules are going to be. So as far as training, I mean, we're not like the hotels where we bring in lots and lots of trainees. Our main area, obviously, is just in the kitchen. And we have fantastic relationships with lots of the different schools here in Cape Town. And ever since we've opened, I mean, I've got students who started me in the original Bree Street restaurant. They came and did internships, and 3 of them now are head chefs with me. So, they play a huge role in our restaurants. They're a massive role. They're a big part of our family, a big part of our group. They're really important part. And a lot of them choose to stay on with us after they've finished their internships and their training in the colleges. And that's wonderful. So I've got a lot of them who are ex-students who are now full-time employees with us. We've also got a lot of students who are in the middle of internships with us at the moment. And obviously, like I said, we've got 300 staff. Out of those 300, we're probably sitting with 30 students, chef students. And like I say, I don't want to let any of our staff go, but when we come out of this, I would see in the beginning, people are going to be on short time. And I obviously need to look after my full-time staff. A lot of them, have got family. There's a lot of people depend on the salary that comes out of Chef's Warehouse. It's not just looking after the person who's working for me. It's also looking after, other members of their family. So it's very important for me that they're my top priority. I think as far as chef students, I will always want to take students on. I love teaching. I think it's my responsibility. I think it's all head chefs' responsibility to teach and train and share our knowledge and help these young kids, give them direction, career direction, everything. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford to have students in my kitchen in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. I'm not sure. I think we're going to go back and we're going to be like when I was a young chef, I used to go and do a stage on my holidays. So I would work for a month for free in a kitchen in Europe somewhere to get experience. So I'd go to a 1 or 2 or 3 Michelin star restaurant. I'd work for free, but my salary was gaining experience in that kitchen. And I think students are going to have to decide when they do internships. I think a lot of restaurants are going to go this route where we're going to have to look after our full-time staff and where students will always be welcome, but for the next year, 2 years, possibly, we won't be able to afford to pay them. So they will have to take it upon themselves to come and work for experience rather than for money. And I think each restaurant which should link up with a hospitality school, a culinary school, or whatever school it is their students are coming from. And I think in return, I would like to say, for example, if it was Silwood and we take Silwood students, in return for the Silwood students coming to us, I would be willing to go to Silwood once a month and teach students about how to run a business, or something in particular that I've got probably a better knowledge of than as a teacher in a college would, because I'm actually running a physical restaurant, whereas they're running cooking schools. So it's going to change. I'm not saying it's going to be like this forever, but I just know from my side, we're going to have to really, really tighten our belts if we want to stay in business. Already, there are horrific stories going around. I know of a lot of restaurants in Cape Town that are not going to open, not going to reopen, and some are quite top-end restaurants. I know in Europe, a lot of my friends in Europe. I lived in Australia for 15 years. I know a lot of my friends in Australia are not going to be reopening their restaurants. I think we were very fortunate that we were in the middle of a very extremely good season. So we had an amazing season this year. We were doing extremely well. So we're quite lucky that we had some reserves in the bank, but they're going very, very, very quickly. We had a new restaurant in Joburg that we were in the middle of doing. We had a new restaurant in Hamburg that we were in the middle of doing. They've all been put on hold for the moment. And the money that I had for the new restaurant in Johannesburg is gone. It's I will not be doing that restaurant this year because the money I had for it is gone on paying rent, I'm paying huge VAT bills, I'm paying PAYE, UIF, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all this money is going out, but I have not made one single rand since I shut all my restaurants down. And unfortunately, the government haven't really helped us. We've had 3% of our whole payroll paid by the government in UIF. So, I mean, that's 3%, which is, I can't see it getting any better as we get deeper and deeper and deeper into this and more people become unemployed. But there's, Anton and Karen have had some great ideas. I think out of this, we've seen how bad the situation here is, how many people go to bed hungry every night in this country. I think that's about to get worse. I know it's getting worse. And I think there's a huge opportunity for the government to step in and to save and help businesses like restaurants. So what we're doing as a charity work in Franschhoek, we're getting massive donations from farmers and suppliers, and from locals in Franschhoek and Stellenbosch and the surrounding areas. Yesterday, I think we received 3 tons of vegetables from various different farmers in Franschhoek. But the farmers are going to stop planting because they've got nowhere to sell to. The suppliers are not going to restock their warehouses to supply us. The locals are going to donate a certain amount, and then that's going to cut off. It's going to end. All this generosity is going to slow down and taper out when everybody starts getting back to normal and tries to rebuild their lives. But I think there's a huge opportunity for government. If I'm only allowed to have 30% of my normal capacity in my restaurant of customers, and I want to keep all of my staff in a job, I think there's a huge opportunity for me to produce food for the poor in my kitchen that the government buy from me, and maybe they can help with a percentage of my labor cost, and maybe I can get a reduction in my electricity and my gas and my rates, etc. And it's sustainable. It keeps the restaurant industry even at a break-even point. It keeps people in jobs, and it keeps people fed. And as we get bigger and stronger, and we can get more people back into full-time positions, and we can get more people back in our restaurants, and things go back to normal, I think there's going to be lots of empty spaces that we can turn into community kitchens, or soup kitchens, whatever you want to call them. But I think there's a massive opportunity to help our industry and to help the poor and needy, because, you know, this need for food hasn't just popped up because of this virus. This need has been around for months and years, and it's going to be around for decades. And now's the perfect time for us all to do something about it, and at the same time to try and save our industry and the farmers. And I mean, everybody is struggling. I've got about 100 different suppliers that rely on us, that service us, from wine, from food, from little artisan butcheries, fishmongers, to people who grow herbs for us, people who forage mushrooms for us, tiny little family-run businesses that are they're on their knees, they're broke. So I think there's an opportunity here if the government get behind it and start putting some serious plans in place. I think there's a massive opportunity where we can solve a lot of problems. But as far as students and training, you know, our doors are always open. I just don't know if we're going to be able to be as generous as we used to be. Our third-year students used to come and do their final exams in our restaurants, where they'd invite 10 or 12 people, and we used to supply all the food and the wine and the service and the staff. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to afford to do that again. That's like 12,000-15,000 rand every time we do an exam with a final year student. I don't think I'm going to be in a position to do that for another year or 2 years. I think the colleges need to look at their fees and see how the fees are spread out now. And I just think we need to look at the whole model from start to finish. Obviously, if there's kids who've got grants who come from poor backgrounds, I'll definitely look at individual cases one by one, definitely. But in general, I don't think we're going to be able to afford to host and pay students for at least another year or so till things get back to normal. And it's all sort of doom and gloom. We're trying to be as positive as possible, particularly for our staff. We've been trying to be very creative. We're going to come back with new ideas for our business. I don't want to compromise on our standards. I've spent years building a brand. I've spent years building a reputation. I don't want to compromise it. I don't want to come back and offer, you know, a half-price product and compromise and everything. I think we're a very good value product. I think when we come out on the other side, we'll still be a very good value product. I just think we're going to have to be a little bit more clever. We've got some great ideas, and we're going to launch a few new things when we come back. And yeah, we're just going to do our best and help as many people as we can on the way.
Thank you, Chef, for that very real and lowdown of what's happening in the restaurant industry. It is an incredibly difficult time for our restaurateurs, for all our chefs out there, and for all our hotels. And I know that SA Chefs, well, my heart and the rest of the people at SA Chefs, our heart goes out to everyone. If I could ask the panelists to please, if they can open their screens and unmute themselves if they're still available. I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us today. As I said when we started this webinar, that this is an incredibly difficult time for our providers, our training providers, because they are reliant on workplaces to offer parts of the curricula that our providers offer, and unfortunately nobody really knows what's going to happen. So there is a lot of uncertainty, and parents and clients are feeling the pinch surely. I think what I've taken away today is that change is the new normal. We're going to have to relook at how we do our curricula and go through the changing of training. And I would like to thank the panelists for your time. I have a few questions and I will quickly go through them. and maybe some of you can, the panelists can answer, what are the legalities that need to be followed or the permits required to offer community charity meal options? Does anybody of the panelists know? You're a part of it, Liam. Do you know what the legalities are?
Yes, we've all had to get permits to allow us to travel. I mean, I'm traveling from Cape Town to Franschhoek every day. There's roadblocks on the M1 and there's roadblocks in Franschhoek. So I've got to show them, I've got a disaster permit, it's called. So I have to carry that with me. I have to have obviously my ID, driver's license, a mask. There's only 2 people allowed in the car. So they're quite strict with everything. And then obviously we've had to get permission to open our kitchens. We've got to all work certain distances. We've got to wear gloves. We've got to wear masks. We've got to sanitize. We've got to have temperature controls. The health inspectors are very much on top of us. They're in on a regular basis, checking up on us and everything. So it's not, as far as I know, you just can't open up and start feeding people. I know there's a lot of people making stuff from home and donating it, which I think is fantastic. But if you're doing it on the scale that we're doing it for up to 4,500 families, it's a very organized operation. We've got we've got a distribution center where all the donations arrive. It goes into fridges or freezers. We've got a refrigerated truck now that we needed because we just didn't have enough space. Then we all get allocated what we're going to do, gets transported down to our kitchens, we prep it all, and then all the finished product ends up going to another kitchen where it all gets packed and it all gets frozen before it's sent out. And it's all recorded, everything's recorded, temperatures, etc. So it's it's like running a professional kitchen. It is run, and it's been run by, it's Marco Jans, it's Chris from Feuillage, it's myself, Darren from Le Coin Francais, Ivor from Beau Constantia, Dave from Maison, Nando from Bree Street. I mean, it's been run by very professional chefs.
Thank you very much. We've had a couple of questions regarding this issue. Chad, you've asked a question, and I think it was Candace. I would also like to encourage people, if you'd like to open for charitable, we will post something on our Ask Yolanda to post something on our Facebook page, and you can contact Daniela maybe at the SA Chef's offices if you need it. Another couple of questions: who is providing the sponsoring of the funds of feeding these charitable organizations? I know from SA Chefs we are using our reserves to fund some of these feeding schemes, as well as obviously sponsors. And anybody else from our panel, have you got specific sponsors, or how are you getting the funding to do these charitable feeding schemes? Liam?
Well, the foundation that Marco Jans set up 3 years ago, I think it was, it's called Isabella, and it's a feeding program for young kids in Franschhoek that she feeds. I think it's breakfast and lunch every day to 400 kids, and she was continuing to do that. But then when lockdown came about and the kids couldn't come to school anymore, the problem became bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And obviously Marco, being who she is, tried to help as many as she could. And then Chris got involved, and then we, gradually, as the problem got bigger and bigger, Marco reached out to me and several other chefs, and we jumped on board. Everything pretty much is donated from, like I say, farmers. A lot of our suppliers have come on board, amazing, like from a baker friend of mine who I don't even buy from. He's baking 1,000 loaves of bread for me. He's going to deliver to me on Friday morning. Yesterday, a butcher of mine, Andy Fenner, he delivered 110 kilograms of minced meat for us. Like I said, the farmers yesterday in Joburg, in Franschhoek, delivered 3 tons of vegetables. So that was butternut, carrots, potatoes, onions, beetroot, just amazing generosity. And then obviously Margot raises money. So, and she's had some amazing donations. And out of that money comes a lot of tinned food. So where we make parcels that go in. So tinned food, long life milk, sugar, the basic stuff, you know, some toiletries, that sort of thing. So it's pretty much 99% it's donations.
Okay, and that's wonderful. And I encourage, obviously, and I know the training providers are also feeling the pinch, but I do encourage everybody to try and get involved as much as you can. Once again, I would like to thank you, Card and Anton and Liam, for joining us today. It has been very, very insightful. You are free to go. I have some questions that I received that I'm happy to answer. And you are welcome to stay if you'd like to hear the answers to those. But thank you very much, and we hope to see you on one of our webinars again. Thank you, Anton, Karen.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. Thanks, guys. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, to everybody who is still with me, thank you very much for you, our training providers and attendees who've joined us today. I hope that you've received some insight, even if it is just even if there's more questions. I think we can all take back that there is changes that will need to happen, and we are going to have to work hard in making that happen. The questions, we went through the sponsoring. Taylor said, are we guys meeting in the office? I think that was from a question Karine posted earlier. No, we're not. Everybody is joining. I'm in my home, and I'm sure everybody else is joining me from their homes as well. I received, is SA Chefs, have we approached the National Tourism Department of Tourism for assistance for members and training providers? I would have to ask Thomas, because he has been in constant talks with tourism, obviously, with regards to our NYCTP students. And maybe you can just let us know what kind of assistance you would need. Chad, implications of the requirements for the CETA for the work integrated learning. As we went through that presentation or that meeting we had the 3rd of March with our training providers, I am not sure. The things I'm getting from NAM and from the Department of Higher Education, and this message was quite clear, that we are waiting for the minister. At this point, there will be no trade testing, and only once the Minister of Education has opened up these, then we will be able to negotiate where this is going forward. I have sent emails and have spoken to the QCTO on how we're going to manage the 3rd of our chef qualification being work integrated or workplace learning. And those answers we will try and get for you as soon as we can. Contacts of catering companies. I'm sure that you can ask the office and email the office for these kinds of contacts if you require them. I see there is a Chefs with Compassion initiative. And once again, if you'd like to join these initiatives, you are free to email Daniela or me, and I will put you in touch with those people. My email address, I'm sure most of you have. It's alsu@sachefs.co.za. Lastly, everyone, there is a State of Tourism webinar happening the 29th of April at 12:30, and a Zoom. We will post the details on our Facebook pages. Just want to go back and make sure I've covered all the questions. I'd like to invite all of you, if you have questions, to please send them to me. I will obviously try and answer them as well as I can. And then SA Chefs, keep a lookout on our Facebook pages for other webinars. I know there's one happening this Thursday with regards to hygiene, and that has been posted on our Facebook pages and our website, and you can go have a look and please join us. I thank everybody for attending. Thank you very much, and I hope to speak to you soon. Keep an eye on our Facebook. We will do education webinars at least once a week from this week. Thank you very much, and please join us again.